What's going on?
A friend of ours is dead in his bedroom. We hadn't heard from him for a while. We think he's dead. His roommate just went in there and said there's lots of blood. I didn't go in, but I can give you the phone to someone who went in there.
Yes, please, can you?
Hello.
Hi, so what's going on?
He's dead. He's in his bedroom.
Okay.
In the shower.
Okay. How did this happen? Do you have any idea?
No, we have no idea. Everyone's been wondering about him for a few days.
She said that there was blood. So is it coming from his head? Did he cut his wrist?
It's all over the place.
Jodi Arias was on her way to visit her family, or at least that's what she told them. It was a typical summer day in June 2008, and Jodi was on a road trip across several states. But this wasn't a leisurely drive or a routine family visit. What Jodi didn't tell anyone was that her true destination wasn't her family's home. Instead, she was heading to Mesa, Arizona, where Travis Alexander, her ex-lover, was preparing for a trip of his own, a trip to Cancun with another woman. As the miles ticked by, Jodi's mind was racing. She knew about Travis's plans, and the thought of him moving on with someone else was something she couldn't accept. The anger and jealousy that had been simmering for months were about to boil over. She had meticulously planned this trip, down to the last detail: a rented car, gas cans to avoid leaving a paper trail, and a new hair color to disguise her appearance. When Jodi finally arrived at Travis's home on the evening of June 3rd, the tension was palpable. Despite their volatile history, Travis let her in. The hours that followed were a chilling blend of intimacy and impending violence. They engaged in one last sexual encounter, captured in a series of explicit photographs, unaware that these images would soon become key evidence in a murder investigation. But what happened next would shock everyone who knew Travis Alexander. How did a seemingly routine visit turn into one of the most brutal and calculated murders in recent history? What drove Jodi Arias to commit such a horrific act? And what details did she try to cover up in the aftermath? But before we dive deeper into the mystery, I'd like to ask for a small favor. The statistics show that more than 70% of you watching aren't subscribed to the channel yet. If you're enjoying these deep dives into true crime and want to stay updated on future cases, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow and ensures you don't miss out on any new videos. Now, without further ado, let's get back to the case. In September 2006, Jodi Arias, a young woman from California, attended a prepaid legal services PPL convention in Las Vegas, Nevada. It was at this event that she first met Travis Alexander, a charismatic motivational speaker and sales representative who was deeply involved with the company. Travis, originally from Riverside, California, had moved to Mesa, Arizona, and was living a successful, outwardly devout life as a practicing Mormon. The initial meeting between Jodi and Travis was electric. Jodi, who had a history of rocky relationships and a somewhat tumultuous personal life, was immediately drawn to Travis's energy, charm, and apparent success. Travis, on the other hand, was captivated by Jodi's striking looks and her seemingly vibrant personality. Despite being introduced through a business setting, the two quickly developed a deep and intense personal connection. At this point in their lives, both Jodi and Travis were searching for something. Jodi, who had recently ended a long-term relationship, was looking for stability and perhaps a fresh start. Travis, who had a troubled childhood marked by neglect and abuse, sought companionship and a partner who could fit into his ideal of a Mormon family life. The initial spark between them seemed to promise the potential for both to find what they were seeking. Their connection quickly deepened, and within a short time, they began a long-distance relationship. Jodi, who was living in California, and Travis, residing in Arizona, communicated frequently, often sharing flirtatious and intimate messages. Their relationship, however, was marked by contradictions from the start. While Travis was devout in his Mormon faith, which advocated for chastity before marriage, his relationship with Jody quickly became sexually charged. This tension between his religious beliefs and his physical desires would later become a central issue in their relationship. In November 2006, just a couple of months after they met, Jody was baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS, the same church to which Travis belonged. Her conversion appeared to be a significant gesture towards solidifying their relationship. Travis even performed the baptism, a moment that was reportedly very emotional for both of them. Despite the intensity of their connection, the relationship was not without its problems. Travis's friends and family members quickly grew concerned about Jody, finding her to be overly possessive and increasingly obsessed with Travis. They noted how she would often show up unannounced at his home in Mesa, sometimes even sneaking into his house through the dog door. These behaviors, which some of Travis's friends considered to be red flags, were early indicators of the obsessive nature of the relationship that was developing. As the relationship progressed into 2007, it became increasingly clear that it was far from healthy. Jody and Travis would break up and reconcile multiple times, with each breakup seeming to intensify Jody's attachment to Travis. During this period, Travis began to express doubts about their relationship, confiding in friends that while he cared for Jody, he didn't see her as wife material. Despite these doubts, the two continued their physical relationship, which only complicated matters further. Travis gradually began to see the darker side of Jody's personality, particularly her obsessive behavior. Jody, who was deeply infatuated with Travis, started displaying increasingly alarming actions. She would show up at his house unannounced, sometimes in the middle of the night, and was known to eavesdrop on his conversations. There were reports that she hacked into Travis's social media accounts and read his emails, searching for evidence of infidelity or any sign that he was moving on from their relationship. This possessiveness began to take a toll on Travis, who confided in friends that he was becoming fearful of Jody. Jody's behavior became even more disturbing when she reportedly slashed Travis's tires on 2 separate occasions. These incidents, combined with her constant presence and monitoring of Travis's activities, left him feeling increasingly trapped. Despite these warning signs, the sexual aspect of their relationship kept pulling them back together. Their intimacy was a stark contrast to the teachings of the Mormon Church, which created an internal conflict for Travis, who was deeply religious. This tension between his spiritual beliefs and his physical relationship with Jody caused him significant guilt, yet he was unable to completely sever ties with her. Friends and family of Travis grew increasingly concerned about the relationship. Many of them felt that Jody was manipulative and potentially dangerous. Travis himself began to express his concerns more openly, describing Jody as crazy and stalkerish to his close friends. He even mentioned that he was scared of what Jody might do if she ever discovered that he was seeing other women. Despite these fears, Travis continued to interact with Jody, partly due to the strong physical attraction, and partly out of a sense of obligation and guilt. As their relationship continued, Jody's actions became more erratic. She would often drive long distances just to see Travis, sometimes showing up at his house after driving hours through the night. Travis, despite his growing fears, would sometimes allow her to stay, continuing their dysfunctional relationship. This back-and-forth dynamic only served to deepen Jody's obsession with Travis, as she seemed to interpret every reconciliation as a sign that they were meant to be together. By early 2008, Travis Alexander had grown increasingly desperate to distance himself from Jody Arias. The relationship had long since crossed the line from passionate to dangerous, and Travis was becoming more vocal about his concerns. He began dating other women more seriously, hoping to leave the toxic connection with Jody behind. However, this only seemed to exacerbate Jody's obsessive behavior. Travis started seeing Lisa Andrews, a young woman who, like him, was also a member of the Mormon Church. Their relationship was more in line with the values Travis wanted to uphold, and he saw Lisa as someone who could potentially be a serious partner. However, Jody's presence loomed large over this new relationship. She frequently harassed Lisa, sending her anonymous emails intended to intimidate and frighten her. In one instance, Jody reportedly sent a particularly disturbing email to Lisa, accusing her of being a shameful whore for dating Travis. These actions created an atmosphere of fear and anxiety for both Travis and Lisa. Despite his attempts to move on, Travis still found himself drawn back to Jody. Their physical relationship, which had been a central part of their connection, continued sporadically. Travis struggled with guilt over his ongoing interactions with Jody, particularly given his efforts to cultivate a more wholesome relationship with Lisa. This internal conflict was wearing him down, and he began to express feelings of being trapped by Jody's influence. Jody, on the other hand, was becoming increasingly unhinged. She began driving from her home in Eureka, California, to Mesa, Arizona, with alarming frequency, sometimes without notifying Travis in advance. On more than one occasion, she showed up at his house unexpectedly, leading to confrontations. These visits were often marked by arguments and emotional outbursts, but despite the tension, the two would sometimes end up back in bed together. In April 2008, Travis had a conversation with a close friend in which he revealed his deepening fears about Jody. He described her as someone who was capable of anything, even expressing concerns that she might harm him. Travis mentioned that he had begun documenting the incidents of harassment and threats, fearing that things might escalate further. This conversation was a clear indication that Travis was beginning to realize the full extent of the danger he was in. During this period, Travis also confided in friends that he was planning a trip to Cancun, Mexico, in early June 2008. He intended to take another woman with him, a clear sign that he was serious about moving on from Jody. This trip seemed to represent a fresh start for Travis, an opportunity to finally break free from the toxic cycle he had been trapped in for so long. However, Jody discovered Travis's plans, and this knowledge pushed her to the breaking point. She saw the trip as the final nail in the coffin of their relationship, and it became clear that Travis was not going to take her with him. Feeling rejected and furious, Jody's thoughts turned darker, and her behavior grew more erratic. She started planning a trip of her own, one that would take her from California to Arizona, ostensibly to visit friends and family, but her real destination was Mesa, and her true intentions were far more sinister. As the days counted down to Travis's planned trip to Cancun, Jody's obsession deepened. The idea of Travis moving on without her was something she simply couldn't accept. On June 4, 2008, the dark culmination of Jody Arias and Travis Alexander's toxic relationship reached its tragic and violent conclusion. This was no spontaneous act, but the result of a meticulous plan that Jody had orchestrated, driven by a dangerous blend of jealousy, obsession, and desperation. In the days leading up to the murder, Jody Arias embarked on what appeared to be a routine road trip. However, this trip was anything but ordinary. On May 28, 2008, Jody rented a car from a budget rent-a-car in Redding, California, some 100 miles away from her home in Eureka. Jody made a point of renting the car from a location far from her hometown, possibly to avoid recognition or suspicion. The choice of a rental car was the first of many calculated steps she took to avoid detection. From the outset, Jody's actions were suspicious. She chose a car that was inconspicuous, a white Ford Focus, hoping it would blend in during her long drive. Even more alarming, she removed the car's front license plate and turned the rear plate upside down. While Jody later claimed that she didn't notice the license plate's positioning, investigators viewed this as an early attempt to obscure her identity during the journey. Additionally, she dyed her hair from blonde to dark brown shortly before the trip, further altering her appearance. To further minimize any trace of her travels, Jody borrowed gas cans from an ex-boyfriend, Daryl Brewer, under the pretense of needing them for a long trip to save money on gas. In reality, these gas cans were a critical part of her plan to avoid leaving any paper trail that could link her to Arizona. By filling up the cans in Nevada, she eliminated the need to purchase gas in Arizona, ensuring that no credit card receipts or surveillance footage could place her in the state at the time of the murder. Jody arrived in Mesa, Arizona on the evening of June 3, 2008. Despite the volatile and increasingly strained nature of their relationship, Travis Alexander allowed Jody into his home. The hours that followed were a stark juxtaposition of intimacy and impending violence. The two engaged in sexual activities, which were captured in a series of explicit photographs on Travis's digital camera. These photographs, time-stamped between 1:40 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. on June 4th, would later become key evidence, providing a chilling timeline of the events leading up to the murder. The last known image of Travis alive was taken at 5:29 p.m., showing him in the shower, looking directly into the camera. This image, haunting in its normalcy, would later contrast sharply with the horrific violence that was about to unfold. At some point after this photo was taken, Jody's demeanor shifted from lover to attacker. She launched a brutal assault on Travis, stabbing him 27 times with a knife. The wounds were inflicted with such force that they severed his vena cava, carotid artery, and trachea. The viciousness of the attack was further underscored when she slit his throat from ear to ear, a wound so deep it nearly decapitated him. As a final act of brutality, Jody shot Travis in the head with a .25 caliber gun, a weapon that had been reported stolen from her grandparents' home just weeks earlier. The crime scene was nothing short of horrific, a testament to the sheer violence of the attack. Blood spattered the walls, floor, and sink, indicating a prolonged and frenzied assault. Despite her efforts to clean up, Jody left behind a trail of evidence. She washed the camera, presumably to destroy the photographs, but the memory card remained intact, preserving the crucial images of that day. Investigators later recovered the camera from Travis's washing machine, where Jody had attempted to destroy it. Travis's body was not discovered until June 9, 2008, 5 days after the murder, by friends who had grown concerned after not hearing from him. His body was found in the shower, decomposing after days in the Arizona heat. The discovery of his body sent shockwaves through his circle of friends and family, who were left horrified by the brutality of the crime. Investigators who arrived at the scene were met with a grisly sight: a once vibrant man reduced to a bloodied corpse, his life violently taken by someone he had once cared for. In the immediate aftermath, Jody attempted to cover her tracks with a series of calculated moves. She left a voicemail on Travis's phone, pretending to be concerned about his well-being, even mentioning that she had been trying to reach him. This was a clear attempt to create an alibi and distance herself from the crime. In a chilling display of audacity, Jody even attended Travis's memorial service and sent flowers to his grieving grandmother, all while maintaining the facade of innocence. However, Jody's attempts to obscure the truth quickly unraveled. The digital camera she had tried to destroy was recovered, and the photographs on the memory card provided a damning timeline of the events. In addition to the photographs, investigators found a bloody palm print on the wall of Travis's bathroom, which contained a mixture of both Jody's and Travis's DNA. This, combined with the physical evidence of the brutal nature of the attack, pointed directly to Jody as the perpetrator. In the days following the murder, Jody drove to Utah to meet another man she had been seeing, attempting to continue her life as if nothing had happened. However, her erratic behavior and the presence of noticeable cuts on her hands raised suspicions. When questioned, Jody claimed the cuts were from a broken glass, but investigators were unconvinced. As the investigation unfolded, it became increasingly clear that this was no crime of passion or self-defense, as Jody would later claim. The evidence pointed to a meticulously planned murder, executed with a chilling level of forethought. Jody's actions before, during, and after the murder revealed a woman driven by a combination of jealousy, obsession, and a desperate need to control the man she could not bear to lose. After the discovery of Travis Alexander's body on June 9, 2008, the investigation quickly zeroed in on Jody Arias as the prime suspect. The evidence against her was mounting, but Jody initially denied any involvement in Travis's death. Her behavior in the aftermath of the murder raised red flags, particularly the inconsistencies in her story and the physical evidence that contradicted her claims. In the days following the murder, Jody was questioned by police but maintained her innocence. She provided investigators with a story that she had been on a road trip to visit friends in Northern California and Utah during the time of Travis's death. She claimed she hadn't seen Travis in months and appeared to be genuinely shocked by the news of his murder. However, her demeanor during the interrogation was peculiar. She seemed more concerned with her appearance and was oddly calm given the circumstances. As investigators began to dig deeper, they uncovered several pieces of damning evidence that placed Jody at the scene of the crime. The recovered photographs from Travis's digital camera were a turning point in the investigation. The time-stamped images clearly showed Jody and Travis together on the day of his murder, contradicting her alibi. Additionally, the discovery of Jody's bloody palm print, which contained a mix of her and Travis's DNA, was irrefutable proof of her presence at the crime scene. Faced with this overwhelming evidence, Jody's story began to change. In July 2008, she was indicted on first-degree murder charges, and shortly thereafter, she was arrested in Eureka, California. During her subsequent interrogations, Jody concocted a new story, this time claiming that she and Travis had been attacked by two masked intruders who broke into his home. According to this version of events, she managed to escape while the intruders killed Travis. This story was riddled with inconsistencies and lacked any supporting evidence, making it clear that Jody was trying to deflect blame. In a desperate attempt to garner sympathy, Jody changed her story yet again in 2010. She admitted to killing Travis but claimed it was in self-defense. During this version of events, Jody alleged that Travis had become enraged after she dropped his new camera while taking photos of him in the shower. She claimed that he body-slammed her to the ground, prompting her to grab a gun he kept in a closet and shoot him as he lunged at her. According to Jody, she blacked out during the stabbing and had no memory of inflicting the 27 stab wounds or slitting his throat. Jody's ever-changing stories only served to weaken her defense and bolster the prosecution's case. Investigators and legal experts noted that her self-defense claim was implausible, especially given the extent and nature of Travis's injuries. The evidence pointed to a premeditated murder, with Jody planning the attack out of jealousy and a desire to control Travis. Despite the mounting evidence against her, Jody maintained her innocence in public statements, even as she faced trial. Her inconsistent stories and attempts to manipulate the narrative only made her appear more guilty in the eyes of the public and the jury. The trial of Jody Arias officially began in January 2013. The prosecution, which was led by Deputy Maricopa County Attorney Juan Martinez, argued that Jody Arias had committed premeditated murder out of jealousy and a desire to control Travis Alexander. Martinez presented a meticulous case, using the evidence recovered from the crime scene, including the photographs taken on Travis's digital camera and the bloody palm print, to paint Jody as a cold-blooded killer who planned and executed the murder. The prosecution also highlighted Jody's changing stories, arguing that her lies were attempts to evade responsibility for her actions. The defense, led by attorney Kirk Nurmi, took a different approach. They argued that Jody had acted in self-defense, fearing for her life during a violent altercation with Travis. To support this claim, the defense presented evidence of Travis's alleged abusive behavior, including testimony from Jodi herself, who took the stand for an astonishing 18 days. During her testimony, Jodi claimed that Travis had been physically and emotionally abusive, and she described him as a sexual deviant who had coerced her into a degrading and controlling relationship. The defense's strategy also involved attacking Travis's character, portraying him as someone who had hidden his darker tendencies behind a facade of piety and success. They introduced graphic evidence of the couple's sexual relationship, including explicit text messages and emails, to argue that Travis had manipulated and used Jodi for his own gratification while maintaining a veneer of respectability in his public life. However, this strategy backfired to some extent. The prosecution countered by highlighting the inconsistencies in Jodi's testimony and pointing out that her claims of abuse were unsupported by any physical evidence or corroborating witnesses. They also emphasized the brutality of the murder, arguing that the sheer number of stab wounds, the slit throat, and the gunshot were not consistent with a claim of self-defense. The prosecution painted Jodi as a manipulative liar who had carefully planned the murder after learning that Travis was planning to move on without her. Throughout the trial, Jodi's behavior in the courtroom further fueled public fascination with the case. She frequently made eye contact with the jury, smiled at inappropriate moments, and even appeared to flirt with her defense attorney. At times, she seemed detached from the gravity of the proceedings, which only reinforced the prosecution's portrayal of her as calculating and unremorseful. As the trial drew to a close, the jury was faced with a difficult decision. The evidence against Jodi was overwhelming, but the defense's portrayal of her as a victim of abuse introduced an element of doubt. The jury deliberated whilst the nation held its breath. The penalty phase was just as contentious and emotionally charged as the trial itself. The jury deliberated for several days, struggling to reach a unanimous decision. The case had become a lightning rod for debates on capital punishment, with some arguing that Jodi's crime warranted the death penalty, while others believed that life in prison would be a more just and humane sentence. In the end, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision on whether Jodi should be sentenced to death. This deadlock resulted in a mistrial for the penalty phase, a rare and unexpected outcome. The judge declared a hung jury and dismissed them, leaving the question of Jodi's fate unresolved. This outcome was deeply divisive. Some members of the public and the media were outraged, feeling that justice had not been fully served. They believed that the horrific nature of the crime warranted the ultimate punishment, and that the jury's inability to reach a decision was a failure of the justice system. On the other hand, there were those who felt relieved by the deadlock, arguing that the death penalty was too extreme, and that life in prison was a more appropriate punishment for Jodi's crimes. A retrial for the penalty phase was scheduled, and in 2014, a new jury was convened to once again decide whether Jodi Arias should receive the death penalty or life in prison. This second jury also failed to reach a unanimous decision, resulting in another hung jury. Under Arizona law, this meant that the death penalty was no longer an option, and the judge was required to sentence Jodi to life in prison. In April 2015, Jodi Arias was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing, Judge Sherry Stevens noted the cruelty of the crime, but stated that she had no choice but to impose a life sentence due to the jury's deadlock. Jodi, who had maintained a composed demeanor throughout much of the trial, addressed the court, expressing some degree of remorse, but also continuing to assert that she had acted in self-defense. She was then transferred to the Perryville prison in Goodyear, Arizona, where she remains to this day. But even as she began her life behind bars, the questions surrounding this case continued to haunt those who followed it. How could a relationship that started with such passion and promise devolve into one of the most notorious murders in recent history? Was Jodi's obsession with Travis a symptom of deeper psychological issues, or was she simply unable to let go of the man she believed was her destiny? As you reflect on this case, consider the contradictions that define Jodi and Travis's relationship. What do you think drove Jodi to take such drastic and violent measures? Could the signs of impending danger have been recognized sooner? Or was this tragic ending inevitable? And how does this case challenge our understanding of obsession, control, and the fine line between love and hate? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What aspects of this case stood out to you the most? Do you think justice was served in the end? Or does this case leave you with lingering doubts? If you found this story as compelling as we did, don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth explorations of true crime cases just like this one. Your support helps us continue to bring you these detailed stories, so make sure you hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest content.